For my son's 5th birthday, my sister gave him a brand new toy car. My son was playing with it when he suddenly went pale and looked up at me with wide, terrified eyes, whispering, "Mommy, my tummy hurts so bad, I feel sleepy." Then he collapsed, his body shaking. My husband grabbed him and ran to the car to get to the hospital. But when he came back, he brought the police with him. My name is Sarah, I'm 34, and for the longest time, I believed the greatest threat to my family was something external. An accident, a stranger, a cruel twist of fate. I never once thought the monster would be sitting at our dinner table, smiling over a slice of birthday cake. I never thought the monster would be my own sister. And so we come to Leo's 5th birthday, the big one, the gateway to kindergarten, the official end of toddlerhood. I was determined to make it the most magical day of his life, a day so full of joy, it would create a memory that would last forever. I went all out. I'd spent months planning a superhero-themed party in our backyard. We had a bouncy castle shaped like a fortress, a caterer serving mini pizzas and kryptonite green juice, and I'd personally spent 3 days constructing a 6-layer rainbow cake that looked like it had been ripped from a comic book panel. It was perfect. Our yard was filled with the shrieks and laughter of a dozen 5-year-olds in tiny, fluttering capes. Mark was playing the part of the friendly villain, letting the kids defeat him with foam swords. Leo was in absolute heaven, his face smeared with chocolate frosting, his eyes shining with a light so pure it could have powered a city. My sister Jessica, naturally, arrived fashionably late, making a grand entrance just as I was about to light the candles on the cake. She was dressed in a pristine white pantsuit, looking as if she'd just stepped out of a magazine, completely out of place and yet utterly commanding. In her hands, she held a single, large gift wrapped in shimmering silver paper with a ridiculously oversized, perfect blue bow. "Auntie Jessica is here," she announced, her voice cutting through the happy din. The children stopped playing. The parents turned. The spotlight, as always, found her. She knelt before Leo, her smile wide and dazzling, a perfect performance of a doting aunt. "I have something very, very special for you, sweet boy," she said, her voice a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Something much better than a silly bouncy castle." She cast a quick, dismissive look at me over his head. Leo, ever the sweet soul, just beamed, oblivious to the undercurrents. He tore into the paper with the chaotic gusto of a 5-year-old. Inside the box was the most incredible toy car I had ever seen. It wasn't a cheap plastic thing. It was a detailed, foot-long die-cast replica of a classic 1960s sports car, painted a glossy, metallic blue that shimmered in the sun. It had working headlights, a rumbling engine sound that started with the push of a button, and doors that opened with a satisfyingly heavy click. It was the kind of exquisite toy a collector would keep on a shelf, far too intricate and expensive for a 5-year-old. "Wow," Leo breathed, his eyes wide as saucers. It was love at first sight. The cake was forgotten. The other gifts were discarded. It immediately became his most prized possession. The other kids crowded around, desperate for a turn, but Leo clutched it to his chest, shaking his head. "It's just for you, baby," Jessica cooed, stroking his hair while her eyes met mine. The message was clear. I win. A special gift from your favorite aunt. For the next hour, Leo was inseparable from that car. He zoomed it across the patio, his small hand gripping the roof. He made it jump off the deck steps, narrowly missing my potted herbs. He sat in the grass for a full 20 minutes, just opening and closing its little doors, his brow furrowed in intense concentration. I watched him, a hard, painful lump forming in my throat. On one hand, his unadulterated happiness was all that mattered in the world. On the other, I hated her for this. I hated that she had so effortlessly hijacked his day, overshadowing everything Mark and I had so lovingly planned with one extravagant, inappropriate gift. It was a flagrant power play, and everyone, especially me, knew it. The party was winding down. Parents, looking exhausted, were starting to collect their sticky, overstimulated children. The sugar highs were crashing into meltdowns. I was gathering discarded paper plates when I saw Leo sitting by himself near my rose bushes, away from the remaining chaos. He was still cradling the blue car, but he was slumped over, listless. He looked off. His usual rosy cheeks were chalky, and his movements, normally so full of boundless energy, were sluggish. I walked over, my heart giving a little nervous flutter. "Hey, buddy, you all tired out? That was a big day." He looked up at me, and the sight sent a spear of ice through my chest. His eyes, normally the color of warm honey and full of life, were glassy and unfocused. A sheen of clammy sweat covered his forehead despite the cooling evening air. He clutched the toy car to his chest like a lifeline. "Mommy," he whispered, and his voice was a faint, reedy thread of sound that barely reached me. "My tummy hurts so bad." He took a shallow, hitching breath, his little brow furrowed in pain. "I feel sleepy." Then, in a moment that will be burned into my memory for eternity, his eyes rolled back in his head, his body went limp, and he collapsed sideways onto the grass. Before I could even process what had happened, his little body started to twitch, then convulse violently. A guttural, terrified sound ripped from my throat. It didn't even sound human. It was the sound of a mother watching her child die. The world dissolved into a nightmare of fractured moments and deafening sound. Mark was suddenly there, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. The few remaining parents were screaming. I heard someone, a distant, distorted voice, shouting that they were calling 911. I was on the ground, my hands hovering over Leo, terrified to touch him, terrified not to. His small body was rigid and jerking in a terrifying, unnatural rhythm. Mark, his military training kicking in, took command. He scooped Leo up. "I'm not waiting for an ambulance," he roared, his voice thick with a panic so raw it was terrifying. "I'm driving. It's faster." He sprinted towards the driveway, Leo's limp form cradled in his arms. I tried to follow, to scream his name, but my legs wouldn't work. I stumbled and fell to my knees on the lawn, a helpless, wailing mess. I was paralyzed, watching the red taillights of our minivan disappear down the street, a fading beacon of my entire life. The backyard was a scene of apocalyptic stillness. The bouncy castle, now deflated and sad, looked like a fallen giant. Spilled green juice soaked into the grass like pools of blood. And there, lying abandoned next to the rose bushes, its metallic blue paint gleaming mockingly in the late afternoon sun, was the toy car. My shock gave way to a white-hot, razor-sharp focus. An adrenaline-fueled clarity cut through the fog of panic. What happened? He was fine. He ate the cake, the pizza, the juice, the same as every other child here. He was laughing and playing, and then he was holding the car, sitting by himself, and then he wasn't. I crawled over to it on my hands and knees, my whole body shaking. I picked it up. It felt cold, heavy, sinister. I ran my fingers over its smooth, perfect surface. Nothing seemed broken or out of the ordinary. I opened the tiny driver's side door with a trembling thumb. I peered inside at the miniature dashboard, the seats, the steering wheel, and then I saw it. On the tiny black plastic steering wheel, there was a smear. A sticky, almost invisible residue that caught the light. It wasn't food. It wasn't dirt. My fingers, now guided by a horrifying certainty, traced the surface of the wheel and found it. A tiny, almost microscopic prick. A puncture mark no bigger than a pinprick, right in the center. It was as if the tip of a hypodermic needle had been pushed through the plastic from the inside. My heart stopped. My breath hitched in my throat. It was impossible. It was the plot of a movie. It was insane. But my gut, that primal mother's instinct that had been screaming at me for years, knew. It knew with absolute, soul-crushing certainty. I looked up, my eyes scanning the chaotic scene, and they found Jessica. She was standing by the patio table, putting on a masterful performance of concern, talking to one of the other moms who had stayed behind. But her eyes weren't on the worried parent. For a split second, her gaze flickered and locked on me, on the car in my hand. And in that fleeting moment, before she could school her features back into a mask of contrived sympathy, I saw it. It wasn't concern, it wasn't fear. It was a flicker of dark, reptilian triumph, a glint of pure, unadulterated malice. She poisoned him, my sister. She poisoned my son. My sister Jessica is 2 years older than me. Growing up, she was the sun, and I was her shadow. She was the homecoming queen, the debate team captain, the one whose trophies lined the mantelpiece. I was the quiet one, the bookworm who preferred the art room to the spotlight. Our parents, bless their hearts, never meant to play favorites, but you can't argue with results. Jessica was a supernova of achievement, and I was just Sarah. I didn't resent her for it. I adored her. I was her biggest cheerleader, convinced she was destined for greatness, while I was content with a simple, happy life. And for a while, that's exactly what I got. I met Mark in college. He wasn't the flashy type Jessica usually went for. He was kind, steady, and had a laugh that could make the worst day feel manageable. He saw me, not Jessica's little sister. We got married, bought a modest house in a quiet suburb, and 5 years ago, our son Leo came into our lives. Leo. My beautiful, bright, funny little boy, he was my whole world. He had Mark's steady nature and my artistic soul. His laughter was the soundtrack to my life, and keeping him safe was my single most important purpose. Jessica's life, meanwhile, didn't pan out the way everyone expected. Her high-powered finance career fizzled out after a messy office scandal. Her series of glamorous boyfriends never led to the altar. She moved back to our hometown a few years ago, working as a high-end personal shopper, a job that sounded chic but barely paid her rent. She was still beautiful, still charming, but there was a brittle edge to her I'd never seen before, a flicker of something cold behind her perfect smile. It started subtly, little digs disguised as advice. Are you sure you want Leo to wear that? It's a bit plain. Or, it must be so relaxing for you, Sarah, not having a real career to worry about. She'd bring lavish, expensive gifts for Leo, always managing to one-up whatever Mark and I had gotten him. It wasn't generosity. It was a performance. A way of marking her territory. Mark, bless his loyal heart, just saw his sister-in-law doting on her nephew. She just loves him, honey, he'd say when I'd voice my unease. She doesn't have a family of her own. This is her way of being involved. I tried to believe him. I really did. I told myself I was being overly sensitive, letting our old childhood dynamic color my perception. But a mother's instinct is a powerful, primal thing, and mine was screaming that something was deeply wrong. I remember one incident about a year ago that should have been a much bigger red flag. We were at a family barbecue, and Leo, then 4, was chasing a ball near the street. I was 5 feet away, watching his every move. Jessica suddenly swooped in, laughing. "Oh, let him have some freedom, Sarah! You're smothering him!" She playfully nudged him further from me, closer to the road. Just then, a car came speeding around the corner. I lunged, pulling Leo back onto the grass so fast I tore a muscle in my shoulder. The car blared its horn as it flew past. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I was shaking, holding Leo tight. Jessica just laughed, a high, tinkling sound that didn't reach her eyes. "See? All that worrying for nothing. He's perfectly fine." She acted like I was the crazy one for being terrified. Mark saw the look on my face and stepped in, telling Jessica to back off. But later that night, he still defended her. "She was just being careless, Sarah. She would never intentionally put Leo in harm's way." But I saw her face in that moment. It wasn't carelessness. It was a thrill. A test. And I felt, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it was a test she was going to run again. The next hour was a blur of sirens and flashing lights. The remaining parents and children were ushered away by police, their faces pale with shock. Paramedics who had arrived after Mark left tried to ask me questions, but I could barely speak. I just sat on the grass, clutching the toy car to my chest like a holy relic. I couldn't let it go. It was the weapon. It was the proof. It was the answer to the question no one else had even thought to ask yet. Then, through the disorienting haze, I saw our minivan pull back into the driveway. My heart leaped with a desperate, painful hope. But Mark wasn't alone. He got out of the driver's side, his face ashen and streaked with tears. And from the passenger side, a grim-faced, uniformed police officer emerged. Mark had come back from the hospital, and he'd brought the police with him. My mind reeled in confusion. Why? What had happened? Was Leo? I couldn't even form the word. Mark saw me and ran over, his face crumbling as he got closer. "Sarah! Oh God, Sarah!" He fell to his knees in front of me, his body shaking. "The doctors, they got him to the ER, and his heart was failing. They said it's not a normal seizure. His blood work is all wrong. They said it looks like he was poisoned." He choked on the word. "The ER doctor." She looked at me and asked what he could have eaten, what he touched, anything new or unusual. "And the only thing, Sarah, the only new thing all day was that damned car." He looked at the blue toy in my hands, and a sob ripped from his chest. All his excuses for her, all his denial, had been burned away by the brutal, fluorescent-lit reality of an emergency room. "I told them," he choked out, his voice raw with guilt and rage. "I told them Jessica gave it to him. They sent this officer with me to secure the evidence, to talk to her." We looked up together. The officer Mark had brought was now speaking quietly with the other officers on the scene. They all turned as one to look at Jessica, who was now backed against the wall of our house, her mask of concern finally slipping into one of cornered, venomous defiance. "This is absolutely ridiculous," she spat, her voice shrill and ugly. "You think I would hurt my own nephew? Sarah is just being hysterical, as usual. She's always been unstable." I finally found my voice. It didn't sound like my own. It came out as a low, feral growl that rose from the deepest part of my soul. "You did this." I stood up, my legs shaking but holding me steady, and I walked towards her, holding out the car like an offering. "What did you put on it, Jessica? What was on the steering wheel?" Her eyes widened in genuine shock. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected me to figure it out, not so soon. She had planned for chaos, for a mysterious, tragic illness. She had planned for doctors to be baffled, for me to be investigated, for my life to be torn apart by suspicion and grief. She had planned for my perfect life to fall to ruin, but she hadn't planned on being caught red-handed. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, her gaze darting around for an escape. A female officer, her face grim and all business, gently took the car from my hands. "Ma'am, we're going to need to bag this for evidence." She then turned her steely gaze on my sister. "Jessica Miller, we need you to come with us to the station to answer some questions." "You can't be serious!" Jessica shrieked, her voice cracking. "You're taking her word over mine? Look at her." She's always been pathologically jealous of my bond with Leo. But no one was buying it. Not anymore. Mark stood by my side, a solid wall of unwavering support, his arm wrapped around my shaking shoulders. The look of utter betrayal on his face was terrible to see. His world had been upended just as much as mine. The sister he had tried to understand and defend was a monster. As they led a protesting, hysterical Jessica to a squad car, her white pantsuit now looking absurd and stained, I could only think of one thing: Leo, my baby, alone in a hospital bed, fighting for his life because of her envy. The hate I felt in that moment was a physical thing, a burning acid in my veins that threatened to consume me. I had spent my entire life living in her shadow, and now she had tried to extinguish my son. The hours at the hospital were a descent into a special kind of hell reserved for parents. Leo was in the pediatric ICU, a small, fragile body lost in a sea of tubes and wires, dwarfed by machines that beeped and whirred with a terrifying, monotonous rhythm. He was unconscious, his breathing controlled by a ventilator. Doctors and nurses moved with a quiet, somber urgency, speaking in a medical language that was both incomprehensible and terrifying. Words like severe bradycardia, organ distress, neurological damage, and toxins floated in the air like poison themselves. The next few days were a living hell. We lived at the hospital, sleeping in uncomfortable vinyl chairs, surviving on vending machine coffee and the kindness of strangers. Every beep of a monitor sent a jolt of pure adrenaline and terror through me. But slowly, miraculously, against all odds, Leo began to fight back. The doctors, with a combination of antidotes and supportive care, were able to stabilize his heart and begin flushing the toxins from his tiny body. He was a fighter. My little superhero was fighting the greatest villain of all. The day he finally woke up, I was by his bedside, as I had been every single second, holding his small, cool hand. His eyelids fluttered, then opened. They were hazy and confused, but they were open. He looked at me, and a tiny, weak whisper escaped his chapped lips. "Mommy?" I broke down, sobbing with a relief so profound and all-consuming it felt like it was simultaneously tearing me apart and putting me back together again. "I'm here, baby. Mommy's right here. You're safe. You're so safe now." While Leo began his slow, arduous journey to recovery, our legal battle was just beginning. Jessica was charged with attempted murder and aggravated child endangerment. She was denied bail. Her defense was a disgusting, desperate tapestry of lies. She claimed I was an unstable, neglectful mother suffering from postpartum psychosis, that I was the one who had poisoned Leo to frame her out of a lifetime of bitter jealousy. She tried to turn our entire history on its head, painting herself as the long-suffering victim of my supposed obsession. The trial was a media circus. Our quiet suburban tragedy was now sensational local news fodder. I had to get up on the witness stand and recount the worst day of my life in excruciating detail, my voice shaking as I described finding my son convulsing on the lawn. I had to look at my sister, my own flesh and blood, as she stared back at me with cold, dead eyes, completely devoid of remorse or humanity. Her lawyer was ruthless, attempting to twist my maternal anxiety into proof of instability, my detailed planning for the party into obsessive control. But the evidence was irrefutable. The residue on the toy car was a perfect match for the substance in the vial found in her purse, which in turn was a perfect match for the toxins found in Leo's blood. Her computer search history was a chilling, undeniable window into her twisted mind. Friends of hers were subpoenaed and testified that for months, Jessica had been consumed with a bitter jealousy over my perfect life, constantly complaining that I had stolen the future of a happy family that should have rightfully been hers. Before the sentencing, I was allowed to give a victim impact statement. Standing in that courtroom, looking directly at her, I finally said everything I had held inside. "You didn't just try to kill my son," I said, my voice trembling but clear. "You tried to kill his joy, his safety, his belief in a world where he is loved and protected. You took the pure love a little boy had for his aunt and you twisted it into a weapon. You didn't just fail as a sister, you failed as a human being. I will spend the rest of my life helping my son heal from what you did, but you will spend the rest of yours alone in a cage of your own making. And you will never, ever be near my child again." The verdict came after only 3 hours of deliberation, guilty, on all counts. I didn't feel triumph when I heard the word. I didn't feel joy. I just felt a vast, empty sadness for the sister I once had, for the family that was now irrevocably broken. The judge, calling her actions, quote, "a chilling betrayal of trust and an act of unimaginable cruelty," sentenced her to 25 years to life in prison. As they led her away in handcuffs, she looked at me one last time, her face contorted with hate. "You took everything from me," she mouthed silently. The delusion was absolute. In her mind, she was, and always would be, the victim. Leo came home from the hospital a full month after his birthday. Physically, the doctor said, he was expected to make a full recovery, though he would need his heart monitored for years to come. Emotionally, the scars ran deep, and were far more complicated. He was terrified of new toys, recoiling from any gift. He suffered from harrowing nightmares that left him screaming and soaked in sweat. The sound of a siren would send him into a full-blown panic attack. The vibrant, carefree, trusting boy he had been was gone, replaced by a child who was quiet, anxious, and fearful of the world. Our family as I knew it was destroyed. My parents were broken, trapped in an impossible position between their 2 daughters, one a victim, the other a predator. They visit Jessica in prison, clinging to some desperate, misguided hope that she isn't the monster the world now knows her to be. Our relationship is strained, polite, and hollow. The easy warmth of our family is gone forever, replaced by the awkward, heavy grief of what we've all lost. Mark and I, however, have never been stronger. The fire that almost consumed us forged our bond into something unbreakable. He is my rock, my partner, in navigating this new, terrifying landscape of trauma and recovery. He is consumed with guilt for not listening to my earlier warnings, and I am consumed with reassuring him that neither of us could have ever imagined this level of darkness. We are a team. We enrolled Leo in therapy with a wonderful child psychologist who is helping him name his fears and process his trauma through play and art. We sold our house, The backyard held too many ghosts, and moved to a new town 2 hours away to start over, to build a new life on a foundation of safety and peace. A few weeks ago, on a quiet Sunday morning, Leo and I were in the sun-drenched living room of our new home, building an elaborate castle out of Legos. He was laughing, a real, genuine, belly-deep laugh, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, as he put a knight on top of the highest tower. He looked up at me, his honey-colored eyes bright and clear, and said, "I love you, Mommy. This is the best castle ever." Tears streamed down my face, but for the first time in a very long time, they were tears of hope, not despair. We survived. My son, my beautiful, resilient, superhero boy, survived. The shadow my sister cast over my life was long and dark and chilling, but it could not, and would not, extinguish his light. Our journey of healing is far from over, but we are walking it together, one small, deliberate step at a time. The monster is locked away, and my only purpose now is to fill my son's life with so much love, joy, and unwavering safety that one day, the memory of that terrible day will be nothing more than a faint, distant scar on a life otherwise filled with happiness. To everyone who has taken the time to listen to our story, thank you. The outpouring of support we've received from friends, and even strangers, has been a light in our darkest hours. If our journey has touched you in any way, please subscribe and follow along. We are determined to share our path forward, to show that even after the most unimaginable nightmare, a family can find its way back to the sun. We are rebuilding, we are healing, and we are loving harder and more fiercely than ever before.